Sure. So first off, I learned SAS in grad school. It's basically a recommendation from one of my advisors because our department was very focused on learning R, but not so much on SAS or other languages. And he was a bit more involved in what was going on outside of the university. So he said, if you have the opportunity, it would be great if you learned SAS. So I forced myself to do it. And it was probably one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got because the first job that I had outside of university was as a statistical programmer for a major contract research organization. So at the time, I didn't really understand the difference between being a programmer and being a statistician. I kind of thought that it was, when you're a statistician, you do the programming anyway. So, call yourself whatever you want. You're still one of those two anyway. But then I sort of learned the ins and outs of the pharmaceutical industry, and I found out that there's so much work that they separate those jobs just to sort of make things more efficient. So I started out as a programmer, and then I transitioned into a biostatistics role, and that fit me a little bit better, but I sort of kept the programmer ideology. Sure, yeah. So first off, I guess the biggest thing would be efficiency, which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that when you write a piece of code to perform a task, if you think you're going to need to perform that task more than once, it's worthwhile to think about, okay, is it worth developing a SAS macro to sort of automate this? So I guess automate anything that can be automated. It requires a little bit more work at the beginning, but it might save you time in the long run if it's something you expect to do more and more. And I don't just mean for tasks in SAS, I mean any task at all. So I mean, obviously SAS macros in SAS for something code related, but for example, if you're working on a project, like I sometimes do, I wake up in the morning and I have to open 6 or 7 different folders with all the study information. So we're talking about statistical analysis plans, we're talking about shells, we're talking about specifications, protocols, and opening up all kinds of documents that I need to be able to refer to quickly. And that's before I even start my actual work. That can take a lot of time if you're on a slow network. So what you can do is you can create batch files in Windows, or similarly in Unix, there's the equivalent there, that let you open up all this at once in the click of a button. So there's resources on how to do that online, and if anybody's curious on how to do that, there's a paper that I co-authored for JSM a few years back that will show you how to do it. So do double-click a button with your project name, and it'll open up all your relevant information. And so that's just one example of something that you can automate that isn't strictly in SAS. So in terms of the next tip, so after efficiency, I would say scalability. So you should be able to write code that you can develop later on. Scalability. So to be able to scale, to be able to scale up a program. So if you write a piece of SAS code, if you refer to it 6 months or a year down the line, you can either build on it without being too confused, or you can reuse the code in other projects because the way the code is written is abstract enough that it's easy to swap out certain project-specific information for new ones. Because if you write a piece of code that is so esoteric that it only really works for the project you designed it for, and then 6 months down the road you didn't comment correctly or anything, and you open up the program, you don't understand anything, that's not very scalable and it's not very efficient. So the joke about that I like is that when you're writing a piece of code, your closest collaborator is yourself 6 months ago, except he doesn't answer emails anymore. So
that's a
yeah. In terms of the third piece of advice, I would say that it's a good idea to just keep learning and stay interested. Well, I guess I would say Glymix, Glimmix, because when I was in grad school, that's the one that I spent the most time with when I got into mixed modeling, and so I sort of developed an affinity for it. Plus, it's fun to say, Glimmix, that's a fun word. But if I wouldn't have said Glimmix, I would have said Proc SQL, because it implements the SQL language within SAS, which is super useful. I mean, in SQL, you can perform tasks that take much longer to write out in SAS in terms of just data manipulation and things like that. But I feel that a lot of programmers kind of are scared of proc SQL because it's a different language and it's a bit tricky to get into, but it's really worth the time investment. So I guess if I can create awareness of it by mentioning it, then that's what I'll do.